Welcome to Range World, the podcast where life, development, leadership, growth, intentionality, and experience come into balance right before your very ears. And now, here's your tour guide into Range World, the president of Get Life in Balance, Rain Kansman.
All right, welcome back to Rain's World. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Paul Nasir. Let me tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul's a retired Cisco guy after 30 years with multiple roles. And let me claim that's Cisco, the food distributor, which most of the people that I'm interviewing on this, I met through that company, including Paul. So prior to his retirement, his Cisco career highlights include these: 14 years at Cisco Detroit, from an MA or a salesperson in that corporation to senior vice president, 6 years in Indianapolis as a president, 2.5 years in Chicago as a president, 3 years as the West Coast market president, which means he had 11 companies that he was responsible for, 2 years at corporate VP sales development and support, which included e-commerce adoption, CRM tool, sales companion design, sales training nationally, and more. And that was all new breaking stuff for our corporation at that time. And then 3 years president of Cisco Specialty Meat Group, 26 companies in US and Canada. Dude, I'm tired just reading that.
It was a good run. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear. I think he told me 1.5 years now into retirement. Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So Paul wanted to discuss the leadership quality of being present. So what do you mean when you say being present, Paul?
Well, I think that a lot of us probably know to eliminate distractions and cell phones, all those things, kind of common sense. I guess for me, it begins with perspective, right? So I think as a leader, you have a team or a group of subordinates that you're responsible for and to, but we don't necessarily always have empathy for the recipient. So what do I mean by that? So being present for me is having respect for the time that you've allotted with the person that you're responsible to and for. And that means to me, if you think about how often you're able to be face-to-face with somebody during the course of their employment. And especially in today's where there's a lot of remote work, right? And a number of my roles as either a sales leader or as a person who had oversight for companies geographically across the US, the time that I actually get eyeball to eyeball with a specific person is actually very limited. So we can get wrapped up in, hey, I'm out visiting presidents of companies and there's a dozen of them, and I've been working really hard for 6 months to get this accomplished. But the person who I'm actually meeting with, even though I believe I've been meeting with presidents, they aren't a person, right? Each president only gets a window of opportunity with me, eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
And so really understanding that that person sees that event differently than I do, they get one chance to get to their boss, right? And convey a message or receive a message. It might be depending upon your role, right? A week or a month, it might be a quarter, or it might be semi-annual, right? These events to them can be rare opportunities to get guidance and direction and leadership. I think that's the piece where for me, it becomes a question of setting that expectation, letting them know that, hey, we're going to set aside this time, put everything away. I'm going to put everything away. The folks that are going to be looking for me know that I'm with you for this meeting or this day or whatever the time period is, and then set a group of expectations. So part of being present is a visit with a subordinate is not a random event or a show up event. It's a planned event. And so many times for me, if I'm going to spend a day or a half a day with someone and I'm responsible for and to, I would set an expectation, and not just distractions, but hey, these are the things that are really important to me that I want to cover.
Yeah.
And would ask them the same thing to reciprocate. So I don't want to come with a full agenda and you run my agenda. I'm really more interested in saying, these are the things I have concerns over, I want to discuss with you, or I see as opportunities. and I expect you to bring the same thing to me.
Gotcha.
And so they build out the time that we have together, because I think that really it's really a highway, right? It goes both ways. So if you really want to be effective as a leader, give the numbers a rest. Most of us know, both the person you're meeting with and yourself, you already know what the numbers are. And reviewing those in person may be required in some particular areas of where you need to dig a little bit deeper. I get that part. But that isn't really why you should be getting together. Most of the numbers and most of the information, I think, Rain, that you can go over is way more effective from a content standpoint via email or some other way that you can memo. You can do all that stuff that way, informational. You can't do leadership that way. And so it's just setting the expectation of the eliminating distractions, I think, is common sense, but it's more than that. It's really saying to you, at this very moment, it's you and me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring things to you. And really, I expect you to bring things to me as well. If I'm going to be effective as your leader, I need some help.
Yeah.
I need to know what you believe you need and where you see opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. So you brought up some great pieces, and there's a couple of things that I want to hit on. But first of all, when you told me this was your topic, I was really excited, because this is a big piece for me. And I always tell people, being present to another human being, 100% present to another human being, is such a gift. It's a gift that shows respect. It's a gift that earns respect. It's a gift of humanity, just to say you care enough to give that time. Difficult. And as we go through that, I remember as a regional training director, I had the time. Usually I'd see people, and I had some time to really get present with them. When they jumped into operations, right? And I had the warehouse at that time, and we had multiple employees, and it was night, and everybody's so busy, and they all wanted time, right? So I really had to set up at that time a situation where I said, I tell you what, I'll give you 5 minutes of my undivided attention. You can accomplish so much in that short period of time. Speaking to your point about quality of time, I can't imagine with the roles that you had, how much, I mean, that's even multiplied, because you had so many more people working for you. So let me ask the second question now, before I get too far off track. Why is it such an essential state to be in for a leader, and what will they gain?
Yeah, so I think you warmed up to it a little bit here as I was thinking about this kind of a question. So the first thing I'd say to you is that get back to the comment that it's a two-way street, right? So it's not really a question of what they'll gain. It's really a question of what we gain. So here's what's most important about this. So to me, to be effective as a leader, I get the numbers. And Rain, they'll walk in my office and tell me the sun's out, the roses are blooming, everything smells good. When I hear that, I know better, right? But really, the conversation, if it's frank and it's a trusted conversation, I am going to get just as much as they are, and sometimes more than they're getting from me, right? So what I'd say to you is that when I was working remotely and in the field, and I would tell people this, listen, when I go out and visit people, I'd like to deliver a value. So they have to report to me, I'm their boss, or I'm a corporate guy, or whatever my current job iteration was. Right. But if they're not getting something from my visit, then I'm doing something wrong. And that was part of the expectation that we would set. So let's put it this way. Again, whether you're talking about an operations employee that you've got 5 minutes with, or a business leader who you've got a day with, as you have this dialogue, and why it's so important that you open this two-way highway out, I will learn more visiting that plant in a day than I could learn in 6 months of reports, right? So it's environment, it's attitude, you're meeting with a management team, they're either looking up or they're looking down. If they're looking down, you have a problem, okay? And what I'd say to you is that your opportunity with this person or people, you have this dialogue with them. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a connection, right? So you've got a personal connection. When there's a problem, they're gonna call you. If they don't know you and you don't know them, you're not going to get that call until it's history and the problem's already happened. If there's a trusted communication that's been developed through these one-on-one meetings, you're going to be, people say, Paul, how did you know that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know anything. I know what people tell me.
Right.
And they're willing to tell me before it becomes an issue.
I love that.
And I think that the other thing I'd say to you is that this is an opportunity through dialogue to, again, this is a little aspirational on my part as a leader, but to better connect that person to the work, right? So they really understand where their work becomes part of the success of the department or the company or the results and they really understand now better than ever, if I'm doing my job well through these one-on-one conversations, it's just you and me right now. And here's why what you're doing is so important. Because it affects customers. It doesn't affect just the bottom line. It affects the customer and it affects the employee. And guess what? I've had people walk in my office and say, well, Paul, we're doing all this stuff. Things are going well. What can we do for you? Like, you're already doing it. Right. Everything that you're doing right now rolls up into Paul. It looks like Paul knows what he's doing. Right. So don't worry about me. If we're having this dialogue and you feel good and the results look good, believe me, Paul's being taken care of. Yeah. So to me, this present thing, Ray, is so incredibly important because you're building and you know what? And sometimes it's not a good relationship. Sometimes it needs to be a pointed relationship. That's better too. A quick story. I had a guy who got a DUI, a district sales manager, and he was going to get fired. He knew it, right? If you can't drive for the job, you're going to have a problem. Right. And he was in jail. And so I was the president of the company and I went to see him in jail and I fired him. He's a good friend of mine today. He'll call me up to play racquetball. And why? Because we had that conversation face to face when he was in jail. Yeah. He lost his job. He was at the bottom of his, I mean, he's at the nadir, right? He's at the bottom. He'll never forget that we talked face to face. Wow. So it's powerful, right? It's this human interaction thing that you're talking about. It's not sociology or psychology or fluff. It's chemical. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. And so for me, those are all the things that, and then I think you also have an opportunity to require your leaders to develop some of these skills with the people that they're reporting to them, right? Things like empathy, which is incredibly powerful. One of the advantages you have working for a company like Cisco for 30 years was most of the jobs I asked people to do, I had done. Okay. So I could relate to them in real terms about some of the challenges we're having. Right. So I kind of had that as an advantage. And I always encourage them to develop that empathy as well, to kind of remember when you were working through the process of the jobs that you left behind and had the opportunity now to lead. Right. And and you know what, fun because your early groundings were very similar. You came from the restaurant business. And so when you went into sales, you understood what your customers were going through. So that's a great piece. Great piece. So here's something I do want to share with people is I know in my interactions with you, and over the years we had quite a few, that you were present to me. You may have only had a few minutes that you dropped in on a meeting. You may have been, or one time where you came and you spoke at a funeral. I mean, you took that time and you were there for those things. So Paul practices what he preaches. And what it always reminded me of was one of my mentors at Cisco, which was Jim Wickus. It was very similar in that way. I mean, he could be 10,000 things going on, but it seemed like he had time for you and he was 100% connected to you. Yeah. So good for you. Good for you. I have one more question, sir. It's not an easy thing, right? And if I'm a young leader just trying to get, or even a veteran leader who hasn't gotten their arms around this skill or quality, how does a leader learn to be present in their conversation with others? Yeah, so let's one basic rule let's start with is, and I learned this years and years ago, back before everything was electronic. A mutual friend of ours, Jerry Hampton, talked me into getting a Franklin planner. And I was a yellow dog guy, right? I came out of the restaurant business. I had legal pads, and I was pretty organized. And then when I got that thing, I added a whole day to my week. Yeah. Immediately in 2 weeks, I was that much more efficient. It was pretty incredible. But one of the things that taught me, Rain, was the most important thing that you manage is your physical presence. And so, especially now where you've got every way possible to communicate with anybody else you want, your physical presence is still the most important thing that you need to value. Right. Because we all have limited time. No matter how much you're able to expand your exposure, to me, that physical presence is still incredibly important. And I think that you've got to be able to demonstrate what it is you're talking about and look for those opportunities. This whole listen, talk thing, right? So if you're really leading, you're not lecturing.
Yep.
And if your subordinate or the person that you're responsible for leading is talking 20% of the time, you're talking 80, you have a problem.
Gotcha.
And it's not your subordinate.
Mm-hmm.
And so the demonstration piece, I think, is just, again, a quick story, right? And I'm a story guy.
I like it. No, they help people understand. I love it.
Yeah, I was in an executive meeting at Cisco, and as field leaders, as presidents of companies, we were invited to come in and talk to senior leadership and the board members about what we need in the field to be successful. Oh. And I tend to be overly frank.
Yep.
Just part of how I'm made. And I let them know. I go, listen, when I have corporate come in and visit with me and tells me that my income on my tomatoes is too high or too low, I really don't need that help.
Right.
And if you feel that way, send it to me and I'll correct it. I go, but that's not what I need. Most of the people that I'm going to report to have done my job.
Right.
Have more years of experience, have more situations they've handled than I've handled. Those are the things that are most valuable to me as I try to lead a company.
Good point.
Okay. So I had that conversation, and the people that I had reported to at the time, through a couple layers, were pretty upset with me because of the other people in the room.
Gotcha.
So the CEO comes, meets me in the hallway later, and he says, Paul, he goes, I understand your point, but kind of the way you presented it, I go, Bill, I get it, right? And I actually ran it by my boss before I said anything out loud, just because I knew it was going to irritate some people.
Right.
And I told him, I said, Bill, you ought to come spend, this is when I was the president in Chicago, come spend a day with me in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I go, I make a lot of sense in the field. I may not always be accepted here. Mm-hmm. And to his credit as a leader, he did. Called me up a couple months later, goes, I'm going to come spend a day with you in Chicago.
Perfect.
So Ray, what he did was we had dinner when he got there with my executive staff at a customer. The next day, we spent the whole day, we had breakfast at a customer with DSMs, specialists, top MAs. There was about a dozen of us, right? Wow. And they were able to have breakfast with the CEO of the corporation and ask him anything.
Wow.
What's the future of a DSM job? What's the future of a specialist job? Where do you see Cisco going in Chicago? Just all these random questions.
Love it.
The next meeting was with a transportation supervisor under the streets of Chicago. If you ever delivered in Chicago, you do a lot underground.
Right.
Long story short is, from a leadership standpoint, not only was I trying to get a point to my group in Chicago,
right,
but now the CEO of the company demonstrated that he had time to have these conversations with these people eyeball to eyeball.
I love that.
They will tell you this story today.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a dozen years ago. Every one of them will remember that Bill took the time to have these frank conversations with them in the field and tell him what he knew and tell him what he didn't know. Right. There were things that he didn't know yet.
Right.
So I think that this idea of being present, there's no substitute for it. And I understand from a scale standpoint, Cisco has 60,000 employees. The CEO can't meet with everybody. I get it. But guess what he also did? He demonstrated to me, right, and the people I report to, what he's willing to do to have those frank conversations with people individually.
Yeah.
So at some point, you've got to model it.
Yeah.
And I hope that, and it's intentional, Rain. I don't model it and hope they get it.
Right.
I model it and go, now what did you get?
Right. Right.
Here's what I understood. And if it's great, then great. And if it's not, I'm gonna go, well, here's what I was trying to show you.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Love that.
I think the answer to your question really is, it's a hard thing. I mean, you're a teacher and a very good one.
Thank you.
After you've taught them all, then they've got to go have some experience.
Right.
Because that's when they get it. That's when the light goes on. They've got the foundational knowledge, but the work in the field is what will connect them to their employees. And the connection to the employees is the most powerful thing.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh gosh, that's some great stuff, Paul. So you and I both go back to an era before, right, these things.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And all that. And we used to get messages through customer service, little pink pieces of paper, right? Yep. And it was a little easier because there seemed to be less distractions going on as we do that. But wow, what I want to point out again is just the impact that Bill had on you by being present and making that move. And I know the impact that being present to somebody has had on me, and people seem to know that. So it is a work. It's a work in progress always to stay present. And the last place for me that I got good at it, unfortunately, was at home. Now my wife stuck with me, and we celebrated 41 years. But It was, unfortunately, you know, I was much better at it at work. I don't know why, you know, it just seemed to be, but yeah, I've gotten much better at home. I've gotten much better at home.
Well, I think, Sin, I don't think it's an accident, and maybe you've got some innate ability. Maybe we all have a little bit of it, but again, you have to plan for it. It has to be intentional. If
Yeah.
you're not doing it on purpose, it's not going to be everything that it could be.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And that's a key. We talk about intentional leadership. So this is another piece on that, my friend. Well, it's been a pleasure. Gosh,
Yeah.
I always learn so much when you're here, my friend. Thank you very much,
I'll
Paul.
tell you, Ray, I enjoyed all the years of regional training and being able to participate in that. The people development side is what served me well through all those roles. They kept moving me around because when I left a role, nobody missed me.
Yeah.
There were people
I
behind
love
me
it.
that were ready to take on the responsibility.
Perfect.
And training and experience and mentoring and leadership, it's not fluff stuff. I mean, it's
No.
what drives a company and a corporation. Without talent, you got nothing.
Yeah, that's true. That is so true.
Yeah.
Very cool, my friend. Well, I'll let you get back to retirement.
Okay, I
And
appreciate that.
knowing you, I know it's still busy, but thank
It
you
is
so
busy.
much for your time.
Yeah. Ray, it's been great. Thank you.
This has been another leadership lesson from Rain's World. If this kind of learning whets your appetite, leaving you wanting for another helping of this kind of content, visit me at getlifeandbalance.com.